For more on this story, we can bring in our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, good to see you. This one boat that's been seized could spark a bigger flare-up. So why is France doing this?
Well, first of all, yeah, we're talking about fishing, right? The rights of small fishing boats to fish in British waters. It's really a dispute that goes much broader than that. It's also about a perception that, from France's standpoint, that Britain has basically been acting in very bad faith following Brexit and not really honoring the terms of what was a trade and cooperation agreement that was signed on the eve of Christmas of last year. So that's sort of the broad picture. But more specifically, what this fishing flare-up is about, and you're right, it's long simmering and it's escalating even more. It's really about, from France's perspective, forcing Britain to issue more fishing licenses to small French trawlers, basically. We're talking about the rights of French and other EU boats to be able to fish within a nautical zone of 6 to 12 nautical miles off of Britain's shores, but also, perhaps even more importantly for France, off of the shores of Jersey, which is a UK dependency, but it's very close to France. And that's also been, the island of Jersey has also been a flashpoint recently. So this is, as the French officials put it, speaking the language of force, because they believe, at least in their public remarks, they believe that only the language of force is something Britain will be able to understand. And they want to bring Britain, as they see it, back into compliance with its commitments under this trade and agreement accord. So it's about fishing, but it's about a lot more. It's about a perception, a broader perception that the Brits are not abiding by the terms of this agreement. How do you make them do so? How do you make them issue more licenses to EU and French boats?
And what's Britain saying?
Well, Britain's saying exactly the opposite. Whatever France says, Britain's coming right back at them and saying that the measures that we just saw in that report, that could start, they've already started, but really from November 2nd, banning British trawlers from certain French ports, stepped up customs and sanitary checks at the borders, which would obviously disrupt a lot of cross-channel trucking, which would be a big issue ahead of the Christmas season. Britain's saying that all of these measures, and including the threats to the electricity supply, because France does supply the UK and Jersey with a lot of electricity via undersea cables. All of that, they say, is disappointing. It's disproportionate, and it's really just out of place, coming from what Britain terms, a very close ally. It says it's also incompatible. It's using the exact same sort of language that France is using with respect to Britain, saying that it's also, in Britain's views, incompatible with the terms of the agreement that they all reached. So each side basically standing there and say, what did I do? I've done nothing wrong, pointing the finger of blame at the other side and culpability, and basically each side washing itself of any blame. What's interesting here is obviously there's a political context on both sides. The fishing lobby is very small. And in fact, it's very small, but it's very vocal. French elections are coming up. Emmanuel Macron is very sensitive to a very vocal fishing lobby, especially in these northern communities. So even if they don't have a giant vote in these coming elections, he knows that their grievances, their demands can resonate with a big part of the electorate that might be prone to vote for his opponents.
And very briefly, Doug, what kind of retaliation can we expect here?
Well, we've seen some of it, right? The banning on British trawlers landing in certain ports, the threats to the electricity supply, the threats to customs and borders checks, stepped up controls, basically making it more difficult for Britain to do trade with not just France, but by extension with the rest of Europe. And this is obviously going to resonate, especially the electricity threats. It's not that France can just, unplug those undersea cables and all the electricity, everything will go black, but it can raise tariffs on electricity. And that would come at an extremely sensitive time when we've been talking quite a bit about the spiking energy prices and the impact that that's having on consumers' pocketbooks. So there's a lot of potential to do not just psychological damage, but real economic damage that hit people on both sides of the channel at a very sensitive time, especially here in France ahead of those elections, and as Boris Johnson is still trying to juggle the post-Brexit fallout.
We'll see how this all plays out. Thank you very much for that, Douglas Herbert there.